Peace. Welcome to the YouTube live book reading of The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality by the great Dr. CHEIKH. Now I'm your moderator and narrator, Uriel Neville Riley, master fitness trainer and master poet. Welcome. We pick up in the third chapter. Let's complete this. Right? I came on a little bit early. It's a big day. Today is a very big day for me. And so, got to get to work. So, got plenty of people to heal. We have the tools to do it, the abilities, right? The balanced ability of healing. We pick up on page 75 of the third chapter, Modern Falsification of History. All right. We're right in the middle for those on the playlist, and I will put a brief vocabulary in the description of the video when it's complete, uploading Divine Days and Nights. Here we go. Next, we come to the thesis of Abibi Emil Amenelu, 1850-1916. A great Egyptologist seldom mentioned. He excavated at el Gaab, near Abydos, and discovered a royal necropolis where he was able to identify the names of 16 kings, more ancient perhaps than Menes. He found tombs of 4 kings, Ka, Den, and Serpent King Djet, whose stela is at the Louvre, and another whose name has not been deciphered. As Amenelu reports, attempts have been made to include these monarchs in the historical period. At the meeting of the Academy of Inscriptions of Belles Lettres, Mr. Maspero tried to place these kings in the 12th dynasty. Then he attributed to them the 18th, next to the 5th, then to the 4th. After refuting his detractors, Amelano concludes, those are reasons which seem to me not to deserve scorn, but rather to merit serious consideration by scholars of goodwill, for the others do not count in my opinion. To Amelano, we owe the discovery of Osiris' tomb at Abydos, thanks to which Osiris could no longer be considered a mythical hero, but an historic personage, an initial ancestor of the pharaohs, a black ancestor, as was his sister, Isis. Thus, we can understand why the Egyptians always painted their gods black as coal, in the image of their race, from the beginning to the end of their history. It would be paradoxical and quite incomprehensible for a white people never to have painted its gods white, but to choose, on the contrary, to depict its most sacred beings in the black color of Isis and Osiris on Egyptian monuments. This fact reveals one of the contradictions of the moderns, who assert dogmatically that the white race created Egyptian civilization with an enslaved black race living by its side. The choice of the slave's color rather than that of the masters and civilizers to represent the deities is, to say the least, inadmissible and should shock a logical, objective mind. So it is that Amelino, after the tremendous finds of his in depth study of Egyptian society, reaches the following conclusion of major importance for the history of mankind. From various Egyptian legends, I have been able to conclude that the populations settled in the Nile Valley were Negroes, since the goddess Isis was said to have been a reddish black woman. In other words, as I have explained, her complexion is cafe au latte, or latte, coffee with milk, the same as the certain other blacks whose skin seems to cast metallic reflections of copper. Amilano designates the first black race to occupy Egypt by the name Anu. He shows that it came slowly down the Nile, founded the cities of Inesh, Ermet, Kosh, and Heliopolis. For, as he says, all those cities have the characteristic symbol which serves to denote the name Anu. It is also in an ethnic sense that we must read the term Anu applied to Osiris. As a matter of fact, in a chapter introducing hymns in honor of Ra and containing chapter 15 of the Book of the Dead, we read, "Hail to thee, O God, Ani, in the mountainous land of Entem. O great God, falcon of the double solar mountain." If Osiris was of Nubian origin, although born at Thebes, it would be easy to understand why the struggle between Set and Horus took place in Nubia. In any case, it is striking that the goddess Isis, according to the legend, has precisely the same skin color that Nubians always have, and that the god Osiris has what seems to me an ethnic epithet indicating his Nubian origin. Apparently, these observations have never before been made. If we accept the evidence of their own creations, the Book of the Dead, among others, these Anu, whom Maspero tried to transform into Arabs, appear essentially as blacks. In support of Amenelu's theory, it may be pointed out that An means man in Diola. Thus, Anu originally may have meant men. For other similarities, see chapter 10. According to Amenelo, this black race, the Anu, probably created in prehistoric times all the elements of the Egyptian civilization, which persists without significant change throughout its long existence. These blacks were probably the first to practice agriculture, to irrigate the valley of the Nile, build dams, invent sciences, arts, writing the calendar. They created the cosmogony contained in the Book of the Dead texts, which leave no doubt about the Negroness of the race that conceived the ideas. These Anu were an agricultural people, raising cattle on the large scale along the Nile, shutting themselves up in walled cities for defensive purposes. To this people, we can attribute without fear of error the most ancient Egyptian books, the Book of the Dead, and the texts of the pyramids, consequently, all the myths or religious teachings. I would add almost all the philosophical systems then known and still called Egyptian. They evidently knew the crafts necessary for any civilization and were familiar with the tools those trades required. They knew how to use metals, at least elementary metals. They made the earliest attempts at writing, for the whole Egyptian tradition attributes this art to Thoth, the great Hermes, and Anu, like Osiris, who is called the Onion in chapter 15 of the Book of the Dead and in the text of the pyramids. Certainly, the people already knew the principal arts. It left proof of this in the architecture of the tombs at Abydos, especially the tomb of Osiris, and in those sepulchres objects have been found bearing the unmistakable stamp of their origin, such as carved ivory or the little head of a Nubian girl found in a tomb near that of Osiris, or the small wooden or ivory receptacles in the form of the feline head. All documents published in the first volume of my Foles Diabotos. Formulating his theory, Amenelo Amenelu continues. The conclusion to be drawn from these considerations is that the conquered Anu people guided its conquerors at least along some of the paths to civilization and their arts. This conclusion, as can readily be seen, is most important for the history of human civilization and the history of religion. It clearly follows from what has been stated earlier. Egyptian civilization is not of Asiatic, but of African origin, of Negroid origin. However paradoxical this may seem, we are not accustomed, in fact, to endow the Black or related races with too much intelligence, or even with enough intelligence to make the first discoveries necessary for civilization. Yet, there is not a single tribe inhabiting the African interior that has not possessed and does not still possess at least one of those first discoveries. Ameneno supposes that a Negro Egypt, already civilized by the Anu, may have been invaded by a coarse white race from the African interior, gradually conquering the valley as far as Lower Egypt. This uncultivated white race was probably civilized by the Black Anu, large numbers of whom it nonetheless destroyed. The author bases this theory on an analysis of scenes depicted on Narmer's tablet, discovered at the Hieroconpolis by James Edward Quibble, 1867, 1935, figure 31. Current opinion unanimously recognizes that the prisoners portrayed on that tablet, with their alkaline noses, represent Asian invaders conquered and punished by the Pharaoh, who in the remote epic had his capital in Upper Egypt. Remember the Nile, the way it runs, okay? What we call north and closer to the Mediterranean is actually lower Egypt. And down in South Sudan and further going into the White Nile and Blue Nile and to Lake Victoria, that would be Upper Egypt. See, we have to make sure that we be clear and precise giving this information so we can see. Be clear. Thank you for being here. Hi, it's Heart Love. Peace, YouTube. All right, we're going to close out this third chapter. Let's do it. We have a chance. We have a chance. Let's go. We have the abilities, like we spoke. This interpretation is confirmed by the fact that the persons walking ahead of the pharaoh and belonging to his victorious army are Nubians, wearing Nubian insignia, such as the symbol of the jackal and that of the sparrow hawk, which we would call Nubian totems. Besides, archaeological data do not support the hypothesis of a white race originating in the heart of Africa. The oxtail carried by the pharaoh on this tablet, and the Egyptian pharaohs and priests always carried, is still borne at ceremonies and official functions by Nigerian religious leaders. The same is true of the garment worn by the pharaoh. The amulet filled sachet on his chest is always present throughout Egyptian history. It is found on the chest of any Negro chief who holds a responsible position in Wolof. It is called Daka. The servant is holding the pharaoh's sandals, identical with the Negroes of the Voganti. Mhm. Walking behind the king and carrying a kettle, he has the typical attitude of a modern Negro servant, a bekneg, or compare with back, which means servant in Egyptian. The fact that the king has taken off his sandals suggests that he is about to perform a sacrifice in a holy place and that he must first purify his limbs with the water in the kettle. The Egyptians are known to have practiced ablutions thousands of years before the advent of Islam. Thus, Narmer's tablet probably portrays a ritual sacrificial scene after a victory. Similar human sacrifices were still practiced in Black Africa until very recent times. In Dahomey, for example, above the victim, the scene depicting Horus holding what seems to be a cord passing through the nostrils of an amputated head, perhaps symbolizes these very lives sacrificed to the god, escaping through the nose of the victim and being accepted by Horus. This idea confirms to the Negro belief that life escapes through the nostrils. Life and the nose are synonyms in Wolof and often used interchangeably. What is the racial identity of the persons represented on the side of the tablet, which I consider the front rather than the back, as is generally thought? I contend that they all belong to the same black race. The king has thick lips, even everted. Mhm. His profile cannot conceal the fact that his nose is fleshy. This is also true of all the persons on this side, even the captives in the scene underneath, who are running away. The latter, like the victims, about to be immolated, have artificial hair arranged in layers or tiers, a style still seen in Black Africa. A similar hairdo worn by girls is called djembe, slightly modified mhm, and worn by married women. It is called the djere, which disappeared from the Sinhalese scene some 15 years ago. Quite recently, Islam has caused the men to discontinue the custom. Such hairdos are no longer seen except among the non Islamic seer prior to circumcision and among the pure. A special form of these coiffures is called andujumbo. The king's hair and that of his servant is hidden by their bonnets. In Egypt, the use of such wigs was popular with all social classes. The king's bonnet is still worn in Senegal by those about to be circumcised, although this usage tends to disappear under the influence of Islam. It is made by sewing together two elliptical pieces of white cloth with one end left open at the head to pass through. A bamboo frame gives the form of the crown worn by the pharaohs and of Upper Egypt. When this bonnet is worn by mature men, the bamboo frame is omitted and the oblong part is generally smaller. This produces what has been called the form of the Phrygian bonnet that the Greeks were to transmit to the Western world. In Diodo, Marcel Goyol has published photographs of these bonnets worn by the Dogon. It can be noted here that the king carries only a mace in the right hand. His left hand, weaponless, holds the head of the victim. The mace may thus be considered as the attribute of Upper Egypt, as was the white crown. The king was probably beginning the conquest of the Nile Valley in this first scene. This was perhaps the moment when he was subjecting men of his own race to his domination. Here we go. Let's go with the tablet. This is Narmer's tablet. Thank you so much for reading with us. Hi, it's Heart Love. Beautiful book. Yes, awesome. Hi, it's Heart Love. Thank you for reading with us. All right, so this is 31. Narmer's tablet. The invention and introduction of writing marked the dividing line between prehistory and the historical period of humanity. Narmer's tablet bears written signs. It would be of great import to be able to date it precisely. Here's Narmer's tablet. So beautiful, powerful history, the African origin of civilization, myth or reality, by Dr. CHEIKH. We're in the third chapter, Modern Falsification of History. This is Narmer's tablet. Thank you so much for looking at it. Right, and here's the other side. Just describing in the reading I was just giving, and we're almost finished out. Couple more pages. Thank you so much for being here. Divine Rising. Happy Thursday. This 21st day of May. It's big, major. Thank you for breathing with me and reading with me. It's Heart Love. The back of the tablet begins with a typical scene. The conquered victim belongs to the city of the abominables, as indicated by the hieroglyph pointed out by Amenalano. The fortified city was probably a town in Lower Egypt, inhabited by a race clearly different from the black race on the other side, a white Asiatic race. The hair of the captives is long and natural without layers. The nose is exceptionally long and alkaline, the lips quite indistinct. In short, all the ethnic features of the race on the back are diametrically opposite to those of the race on the front. We cannot overemphasize the fact that only the race on the back has Semitic features. After this second victory, the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt was probably achieved. It was symbolized by the scene in the middle of the reverse side, the symmetry of the two felines with menacing leonine heads, indicating that they would be fighting if they were free, but they will henceforth be held in check and unable to injure each other, thanks to the ropes tied around their necks and held by the two symmetrical personages. This would symbolize unification in line with characteristic representation common in Egyptians and blacks in general. In the scene at the top, the king is wearing the crown of Lower Egypt, which shows that he has just conquered it. The second stage of the conquest of the Nile Valley is thus ended by the pharaoh. He now holds in both hands what can be considered as the attributes of Lower and Upper Egypt. Here, once again, the king has removed his sandals. They are held by his servant, who, carrying the same receptacle, walks behind him as in the scene on the front side. We may therefore assume that the site is sacred and that the victims were immolated ritually, not massacred. Before the king stand 5 persons. 4 of them hold banners bearing totems. The first two, hawk and jackal, and clearly from Upper Egypt. The last one represents not an animal, but an unidentified object, which may well be the emblem of Lower Egypt, just conquered. For all these reasons, Amelino interpretation seems unacceptable. The opinion that all the captives depicted are Asiatics is apparently a generalization that overlooks the detail of the tablet. To the same extent, Amelino's explanation, which considers all the conquered people as Nubians, seems erroneous. The fact that the captives on the obverse are really Nubians may have led him to miss the ethnic difference between the latter and the victim crushed by the bull on the reverse. According to Amenano's own reproduction, the latter does not wear his hair in layers as do the Nubians on the other side. Furthermore, he does not have their other ethnic features. Only by disregarding these details in good faith could he have reached the conclusion that an uncultivated white race from Central Africa probably conquered the valley from the Negro Anu population. As a matter of fact, even if there were infiltration by Asians or early Europeans during the prehistoric period, the Egyptian Negroes had never lost control of their situation. This is always indicated by the numerous Amarician statues portraying a conquered race of foreigners. In the Le Début de l'Art en Égypte, the Belgian Egyptologist Jean Capart reproduces a statuette of a white captive kneeling, hands bound behind his back, hair in a long braid hanging down his back. From the same period, proto-caryatids are also found in the form of furniture pedestals depicting the type of conquered white race. By contrast, we see blacks shown as citizens freely strolling around in their own country. Here we see 4 women in long skirts, quite similar to black women represented on 18th dynasty tombs, including the tomb of Recamera. Although indistinct, the object they seem to be carrying has been assumed to be a cow's ear. I should be inclined to view it as the earliest appearance of the Ansat cross, a symbol that soon thereafter entered Egyptian semiology and never left. This indicates that Negro women were quite at home in the midst of animals from their own land. The question again arises, how could the Egyptians of that epoch know animals from Central Africa, as well as the inhabitants of Central Africa? If these people were Asians or Semites entering the Nile Valley through the Isthmus of Suez, is not the recorded presence of the aforementioned animals and blacks on the ivory pieces just described conclusive evidence that Egypt's conquerors came from Central Africa? That would be logical. See, from the center point, as we learn through training the body, through the core, you can control every part of your body, and your balancing comes from your core. Your explosion and jumping comes from the core. The center point and the central spread out, that would make more sense than something coming from all the way over here and then settling here and then sprouting out. Yeah, it's critical thinking. We're going to be talking about that also this Sunday in a seminar we have coming up. Are two so powerful. Highest heart love. Less. We're almost finished. Thank you so much for the likes and subs. All our friends and family, fine days and nights. Highest heart love. Contrary to generally accepted notions, it is clear that the most ancient documents available on Egyptian and world history portray blacks as free citizens. Mastery of the country and of nature. Near them, the several white prototypes, then known, the result of early European or Asian infiltration, are depicted as captives, with hands tied behind their backs, or else crushed by the load of the piece of furniture. This, incidentally, could be the origin of the Cariatids of the 5th century, Aristidum, imitated by the Greeks thousands of years ago. We did it. Yes! Completion of chapter 3. Woo! Yes! Did it. Chapter 3 is complete. Thank you for the likes and subs. We're pushing towards 700. Reading books on this peaceful part of YouTube. The African origin of civilization, myth or reality, by Dr. CHEIKH, edited and translated by Mercer Cook. Wow! Happy Thursday. Thank you. All right. We completed chapter 3. I want you to have a wonderful day. I'll be sending love to y'all during the meditation earlier today. Go out on the run, already had the workout. Then we have the seminar tonight. Thank you so much. Let's have a glass of love water in honor to all the solar returns, all our friends and family, and to all the greatness that has elevated. We honor you, all our ancestors. Thank you so much. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Divine days and nights. Thank you so much for reading with us, part of the book lovers community. We're pushing towards 700. This peaceful part of YouTube where we read books and learn from masters. I'm your master fitness trainer, Uriel Navarro. Thank you for reading with us. Peace, peace. Here we go. Let's sing I love you to our friends and family as we go off into the day to shine our light. I, love, 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 love. You, 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 you. I. Love, 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 love. You, 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 you. You know, I love myself. Peace, peace. Fine days and nights, 17,070. Shaking it up on YouTube, reading books, right? For real. Woo! I love it. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon. Peace, peace. Thank you.